Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yes? If you can't hear me in the back, raise your hand. All right. Did Mary Ann send out an email last night giving you homework? It's right here. I almost printed out a bunch of copies and got highlighters and things like that, but I figured that would be horrible for the environment. So when I post the slides, I'll post a link to this thing, but you already have the link. But anyway, I am assigning homework. We'll come back to it, and it will be on the final. Anyway, but I will not be asking questions, so don't worry about that. If you did not read it, we'll come back to it. All right, so I'm Jason Huggins, creator of the starter of the Selenium project. I'm Hugs on Twitter. If you want to hashtag this tonight, use GovTest. And I think I got this right, but tomorrow is Earth Day, so happy Earth Day's Eve. Yeah, so let's just get into it, right? So let's go back in time to October 1st, 2013. Imagine this is like Law and Order. This is where it's like the internet, dun dun, right? So October 1st on the internet, dun dun. HealthCare.gov launches, and guess how many people were able to register for enroll in healthcare that day?
0.
6. 6 people. But was that the headline? Was that the #1 headline of the day? No. What else was going on that day? Government shutdown, right? Does anyone kind of remember when the government shutdown ended? When it started, shut up, whatever. Anyway.
Too soon.
All right. Debate. Yeah, the discussion at the bar afterwards is going to be awesome. It was basically the middle of the month, right? But starting October 1st, the site was horrible, but the biggest political blunder of all time on the Republican Party was to do the shutdown, because that basically gave the administration 2 to 3 weeks of free time to figure out what the hell to do with this website, because it was not the headline. But the government shutdown ended, and then the #1 story was the website was still sucking. So actually that head start didn't really help anything. However, let's fast forward. This is now after the shutdown is over, and this is now in the Rose Garden. And the president is giving some public remarks about the Affordable Care Act. And I have this video here. Hopefully this works. And I was watching this just like everybody else was. Hold on. Let's see if I can get it.
Doing everything we can possibly do to get the websites working better, faster, sooner.
Don't laugh.
We've got people working overtime, 24/7, to boost capacity and address the problems. Experts from some of America's top private sector tech companies, who, by the way, have seen things like this happen before, they want it to work. They're reaching out, they're offering to send help. We've had some of the best IT talent in the entire country join the team, and we're well into a tech surge to fix the problem. And we are confident that we will get all the problems fixed.
Did you hear that? Tech surge. Tech surge. Tech surge, right? So the big question now is, at least on some of the really more nerdy websites, is tech surge. What the hell is that? That was October 21st. What was going on in October 18th? It started at the White House, at the gates, where you walk into the White House. But then that day also included the Offices of Health and Human Services, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. There's 2 M's in there. It's actually the CMS abbreviation is kind of confusing. Anyway, QSSI, which actually had the testing contract, and CGI, which had the development contract, which is a whole other story right there, 2 contractors. But those are the 2 main contractors in this whole thing. But these are all the locations. This is the Law and Order dun-dun of all the places. Who were actually the original tech surgers? First, you have Todd Park, who reports directly to the president, and he's the US CTO. He's now the former US CTO. Megan Smith, I hope I have her name right, is the current US CTO. But for most of the development of HealthCare.gov, Todd was not, as he would say, scrubbed in. granted, I don't know all the things that he was involved in, but definitely after October 1st, when everything was going horrible and the president couldn't get a straight answer from anybody, he basically appointed Todd to say, Todd, find out what's going on and fix it. That was his job. So what Todd then did is there was kind of a two-pronged strategy. These people were basically there on October 18th. Gabriel Burt, Mikey Dickerson, Greg Gershman, Brian Holcomb, Ryan Padchadsaram, and Paul Smith. Gabriel Burt worked on Obama's re-election campaign and kind of the analytics. He's the CTO at Civis Analytics in Chicago now. Mikey Dickerson was a SRE, site reliability engineer at Google, but he also did some scaling helping with the MySQL databases, stuff like that on that campaign. Greg Gershman was a PIF, Presidential Innovation Fellow. So this is kind of a program that they had where you can kind of be really cool and awesome and work for the president and work on these cool projects. Brian Holcomb, I don't know much about him actually. He was there for this day, but he rolled off pretty quickly. So I can't say much about him, but he's awesome. and he was there to help on that first day. Ryan Padchadsaram is also a PIF, Presidential Innovation Fellow. He's still plugged into the government. And I think he's like, his title is Deputy CTO. And then Paul Smith. He lived in Baltimore at the time, but I think met him through kind of the tech circles in Chicago. He's back in Chicago. He is the co-founder of a company called Everyblock, which got acquired by MSNBC or NBC. And also he ran the Democratic National Committee website. So he kind of knew a large-scale site. Anyway, this was the team that Todd pulled in, some from inside the government, the two PIFs, and then some from outside with Mikey at Google. I think actually that day, Mikey was dialed in on a conference call. But then a couple days later, he showed up. So that's basically kind of 1.0 of the tech surge. And of course, the president's talking about these guys, basically, a couple days later. Now, the weird thing about the tech surge is that it's kind of this amorphous term, and it's not just these 6 people did everything, if I got the numbers right. These number of people. There's also all of the contractors, hundreds, thousands of all the people involved who were part of the problem or also part of the solution. And you had all the vendors, you had Oracle, Red Hat, all of these folks were all involved in this thing to help fix it. So it wasn't like no one was doing anything, it was just these people. But these people were kind of the eyes and ears for the president because basically up until that point, he got horrible information. And they were originally brought in. The original idea was they were going to do an analysis, give kind of a report after a couple of days, and then say, here's what you need to do, and that was it. But of course, they stayed for a little bit longer. So where was I on that day? Well, I was, of course, saying snarky things on Twitter just like everybody else was, right? Right, yes. I'll give you a chance to read that. But actually, at that time, this is a picture of me standing up from my desk and taking a picture of it. This is in my basement in Chicago. I call it the secret math lab. These are my 3D printers, and that's the laptop that controls the printers. And I was getting ready for this. And now I realize it should have been called a workshop, not a hackathon. I've been corrected. But it was a workshop for these robots that I build, these testing robots. And it was going to be at GitHub. It was going to be awesome. And so I was frantically printing all of the parts for this thing and getting ready to fly out to San Francisco and give this robot workshop. And it was going to be awesome, living the dream, San Francisco robots, all that stuff, right? But then I got an email. So on October 28th, in the secret math lab, Paul Smith sends me an email. I got his permission to excerpt this. And I'll just, I can read it to you, but the big part is, hey, we need help with automated testing, get integration tests to the developers. We could use a lot of help, starts immediately. Interested? And so this was I'm literally sitting at my desk, my 3D printers are working. I feel like I'm already kind of living the dream, right? Robots, and it's awesome, future stuff. And this is midnight in Chicago. So I step back from my laptop. I go, what the heck? What? I go upstairs, wake my wife up, and show her my phone and say, read this. Is this what I think it is? She's like, yeah, that's what it is. Write them back. And so I wrote him back, and we talked. That was like a Monday, and well, I'll get to it. But I'm acquaintances with Harper Reed. So humble brag, he follows me on Twitter, so I can direct message him. And so the next day, I'm like, yo, hey, I just got this interesting thing from Paul Smith. I would like to talk to you about it. And the interesting thing about Harper is that he was the CTO of Obama's re-election campaign. So he kind of knows about the crazy horribleness of anything related to government. So yeah, his advice actually was rather soothing. Just go and play. Don't worry about it. But I actually wrote this down. This is a quote from the phone call, because in the moment, I got kind of freaked out. He said, I wrote this down. This is the exact quote of the conversation. Is this going to be like the BP oil spill? Like once it's fixed, everyone will want to forget about it? And he said, no, you are literally the tech surge, Jason. So again, what? No, I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking my coffee, watching the president talk. I am not the tech surge. Like, nope, you are literally the tech surge. Like, great. So, of course, now I can't say anything about this because I could get totally in trouble. And actually, footnote to history, if it had gone so horrible, all of those guys on the 18th, when they went to talk to CMS and HHS, they weren't so happy to have a bunch of new people come in. They were not so happy, making room for these guys. They said but Todd kind of told them look, if this goes horrible, you'll never be able to talk about this for the rest of your life. You're not going to want to be associated with it, but this is potentially career damaging to be involved with this at all. Anyway, so now it's what's the joke about? It's if it breaks. Anyway, something if it's tragedy versus comedy. Anyway, but now it's comedy because we're able to get it mostly fixed. Anyway, but at this time, I didn't get any permission to talk about it. Actually, people were getting subpoenaed, and the headlines were about it, and the Republicans were now, instead of all shut down, this is now HealthCare.gov all day long, every day. Hi, Mike. Along with agreeing to show up, I also secured legal representation for the outside risk that I did get subpoenaed to Congress, and there actually are lawyers who specialize in, so you just got subpoenaed by the Oversight Committee, right? So I had that in my back pocket, knowing, and so there's a certain level of stupidity prevention by not just saying oh yeah, Darrell Isis is an idiot on Twitter. You don't want to just say that and get in trouble. So I now started dabbling in the art of the subtweet. And so see, these are some of the things. This was October 29th. Paul also asked, hey, who else would you want to bring onto the project? But I can't just tell everybody in the world, hey, HealthCare.gov, who wants to help me fix it? And so this is actually a very serious question. I know a lot of people, and I'm sure everyone in this room would have done an awesome job. But at that point, I didn't realize, this is before I showed up. I had a very, unfortunately, small circle of people who I've worked with for many, many hours. And know their temperaments, know their skill sets, and so it was actually it was really hard to figure out who else should I talk to. But the first person I talked to actually was Jennifer Bevan. She was my coworker at Google. We were on the Selenium farm, and unfortunately she wasn't able to join me. She did refer me to one other person at Google, and I'm blanking on his name. I want to say his name is Mike. He was also on the Selenium stuff at Google, but he had moved on to Square. And then his email was like, well, I talked with Jack, and no, I can't do it. And like, Jack? Oh, right, Jack Dorsey. OK, so you're busy. But the two people I tried to recruit couldn't come with me to DC. And at that point, Paul was like, just get here. It's OK, maybe we can add people, but getting someone here, somewhere around the testing stuff would be good. Let's see, some other things, again, before I got there. Again, I couldn't actually talk about it. I didn't have permission. Let's see. Also, this was this is my texting back. This is not tweets. These are my texts back and forth to Ashley Wilson at Sauce. Literally, I'm in the war room at that point, and so I'll just read the first part. Oh, you're getting to it, right? Yeah, I'm on site. Oh my God, I just got introduced in the morning stand-up, about 50 people in the war room as the guy who's going to fix everything. Todd Park just came up to me and thanked me. It's crazy. The site went down today. It's 100 more. This is true. 100 times more intense in the war room than you could possibly imagine. But other than that, having a great day. So this is a picture of the war room, and this is Mikey Dickerson standing, freshly shaved, I suppose. And this was in CGI Federal's office in Herndon. And this particular area that we were actually hadn't had staff in there, so there was like a year, for a long time, so there was like a year's worth of dust just in there. But this is where they enacted this war room. So there was a 10 a.m. meeting and a 6 p.m. meeting, and we just got everyone who's involved in this thing to all be there at the same time. On the far left is Greg Gershman, and then right here in the middle, that's Gabriel Burke. And I can't remember the names of the other guys. I think that guy works at New Relic, though, or did. And we also had, interestingly enough, the dashboard in the back. We had, I think, Google Analytics and I forget what the other one, Gecko board or something like that. But you had everyone, about 50 people there in the morning and the afternoon. This is also another picture of the war room. And you had basically representatives from everyone, every government org, but mostly all the contractors, everyone. So when you say tech surge, it's like, yeah, there was a couple of people that are out there, but then there's also everybody who was in this room helping. And then there's so it was a lot of people. Some other subtweets. This is when I had just walked out of CMS's building and gave him some advice on how to write some tests and set up continuous integration. And I was just like, oh my God, the world needs more JavaScript programmers. It's kind of important. And I think that's the first line. It's either the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. Can anyone fact check me on that one? Constitution, right. So if you want to say, well, anyway, there you go. It's in the Constitution, so you have to help. This one was the saddest. This is December 4th, so I've been on site for a full month at this point. There's a whole other talk that I could give on basically the seven or six stages of grief. I forgot which one, how many there are. There's anger, disbelief, finally capitulation. I joke that sometimes my career has just been this one interesting series of stories avoiding programming in Java, but finally, at the end, I wrote some Java code. And Mike actually knows a lot about this. Oh, Mike also here, he works at still works at Optum, and he was embedded with me going around to the testing teams and seeing how they test. And so he was there. He can tell me, he was there at the moment where I embraced the Java. For a while, it was Python and maybe Ruby. We had lots of conversations about this, but in the end, I had to embrace the Java. So that's my story of just getting injected into this thing, and it was kind of crazy. I also remember making jokes about looking up that scene from Armageddon, right, where they're asked to help the government. And anyway, it was ridiculous. I would like to say I don't have to pay taxes anymore, but unfortunately, I do. I forgot to ask for that. Anyway. All right, so that was the question, right? So, and also this whole this presentation is basically these are like the untold stories that for whatever reason didn't get out into the world. So finally, I'm putting them out in the world. This one is that one was more personal, but kind of more of a fish out of water. Everyone would have like, holy cow, this is crazy. And I'd never done government IT before, so this was definitely insane. Anyway, so this is ridiculous. The button. The Law and Order, dun, dun. U.S. Capitol Building, Darrell Iss's Oversight Committee, November 13th. Todd Park got subpoenaed by the Oversight Committee, and now he's testifying. That's not Todd Park. This is Representative, now Senator, James Langford from Oklahoma. And I will just play this clip. But he is talking to, in the hot seat, Todd Park. And I've heard that on a good day, I don't know how many levels of hell there are in Dante's Inferno, but it's whatever the worst one is, that's apparently the Oversight Committee. So Todd had to leave and prep for this thing. And anyway, here's Representative Langford.
About an hour and a half ago, I went on my iPad and got to HealthCare.gov, and I hit this button that says create account, and it doesn't go anywhere. And it just changes colors and does nothing. So I reloaded on this, and for about an hour and a half, I've just occasionally hit that button. This is the frustration, the struggle that a lot of folks have, and they all have the frustration with. We get that. We have the questions, though, as we walk through this process of now what happens.
Right. So what was our reaction when we were watching this on C-SPAN? Because that, of course, what you do. You watch everything on C-SPAN, right? What the heck happens? I think, actually, let me give a little story here. So that was around noon or so in the afternoon. Todd finishes his testimony, and I think he swings by the White House, but then he comes and hangs out with the team. So Todd was basically our kind of go-between between the president and then all the people. So he came from the White House, and you can know anyone who has the White House. They've got the little name tag thing, the beaded necklace, I call it. It's like I don't know how to describe it, but anyway, he's got his name tag. He hides it. So Todd comes right from the White House, and we're like, hey, let's go out to dinner and talk. So that was actually one of the big things about hanging out with Todd is hearing how he's doing, what's going on, and the thing he did in that hearing was take down Representative Langford's name, said he'll follow up with him about that button, was very gracious, even though Representative Langford was totally being a jerk about it. But again, hey, that might actually be a real thing. So we go to dinner. Afterwards, Ryan, who's kind of like our, if everyone has their special ninja skill, Ryan was looking at the analytics dashboard and sent off an email after dinner saying like, hey guys, I actually think there's something to this create account button thing, but I don't know what it is. And the weird thing is that like as far as he was concerned, it was broken. It wouldn't let him go anywhere. But if you looked at the data, enrollments were still going through. And so it wasn't totally broken, but there was definitely a drop. And it was basically he was saying, I think there's something here, but I don't know what it is. And we all tested the site. Same thing. It worked for us. This is all the testing teams, all the awesome tech surgers. None of us could reproduce the issue. But my wife could. So let me show you what happened. So Ryan, I read that email, and then I call my wife, Kelly, who's awesome, in Chicago, and say like, oh, hey, did you see, we had a crazy day, Todd would testify. Did you see that representative guy pushing the button on the iPad? Wasn't that, what a jerk, isn't that ridiculous? Like, no, actually, after I saw that, like, you saw that? Wait, what? You were home watching? That's awesome. It's like, oh, actually, my 10-year-old, back then, 8-year-old son, Finley, he takes credit for this, because if he didn't get sick at school and had to get picked up, Mom wouldn't have gone home from work to pick him up, and so she wouldn't be sitting on the couch watching C-SPAN, watching my son. Anyways, so here she is watching it, and after Representative Langford hit that on on the iPad, she opens the laptop, brings up Firefox, does the same thing he did, and she can't get through at all either. She's now apparently the second person in America who can reproduce this issue. And then I remember holding the phone. I'm standing there in this is actually Tyson's Corner at QSSI's office. And just remember wanting to reach the phone, what did you do? What exactly did you do? Tell me everything, down to the detail. So she did. We wrote it down, I transcribed it, and this is basically the process. If you go to HealthCare.gov, this is a slightly different version, but if you do what the page tells you to do. So if you, and I'll kind of get to some hinting here about how testing worked versus how the rest of America worked, or actually 80% of America did it. The testing teams and all the smart people just clicked the login button because that was a short circuit through a whole bunch of stuff to get to the create account button. But if you do what 80% of America does and start where it says start, apply online. So you click apply online, and you eventually get to this page. Unfortunately, it's scrolled off of this, but you select your state. That's a key part of this. You select your state. Once you select your state, you get to this kind of page, and eventually then you can start filling out all your data and applying for healthcare. And as it turned out, there are two ways to create an account. There is going to the login page, and it short circuits you to kind of like kind of jumps you right here. And then there's this very long-winded thing of selecting a state. And this is where I'll kind of really get into some nerdy detail. If you notice at the top, it says Learn, and then this next page it says Get Insurance. There's actually two sides to HealthCare.gov. There was the Learn side and the Get side. And of course, that also means then two separate contracts, two separate everything. Development teams, testing teams, deployment, you name it, a completely separate universe of HealthCare.gov. That was just the Learn side. And that was the bulletproof, couldn't sync, nothing's wrong with it, it's not really code, just read-only content management, blah, blah, blah. They're just flat files, right? This was all the FAQs, all the information that wasn't the application, it was the Learn side. And of course, it had a completely different deployment process, and occasionally we got notified about it in production. Right, so what happened was that when you selected that state, which unfortunately in this screenshot you can't see, it's right below it. You select your state, and that sets a cookie. And cookies have to be formatted properly, and then, but it wasn't. When you get dumped into the Create Account page, you're now in the Get Insurance site. Now you're in the application, the big horrible thing that's terrible and 1,000 billion people were working on it and it costs millions of dollars and all that stuff like that. You're now in the app. But if you did that little wizard walkthrough thing where you selected the state, this app is now, if it sees that you come through that workflow, it's going to try to read that cookie to see which state you're in. And if you're in a certain state like Kentucky, they'll kick you out to the state exchange. But if you're in the federal exchange, it'll let you keep going. But unfortunately, on the Learn side, the unbreakable, there's no code there thing, set the cookie in a corrupted data format. But that was setting the trap, because nothing broke there. It only broke here because this was a single page application. Everything gets inflated at load time with JavaScript. And two things were unfortunately wrong. One, that cookie was configured corruptly, so it was just a bad data format. But then two, reading in and parsing that cookie was not wrapped in a try except clause. So when that blew up, it blew up the rest of the loading of the page. And so the things that Representative Langford saw, that Create Account button, was basically kind of like the static HTML of that page. The page hadn't been inflated, or whatever the technical term for it is, of like the JavaScript hadn't loaded. So if you brought up a developer console, basically this horrible mess in the console would be there saying, error online, blah, 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 of some JavaScript file. Anyway. But the thing was, no one could reproduce this issue. Representative Langford could, right? But my wife, to get to that detail, after I got those repro steps, I whipped up my handy dandy favorite cloud service and didn't have an automated test. I just used the manual testing thing. But before that, I also looked up the Google Analytics for HealthCare.gov, and it's all the usual suspects for Windows and Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox. Got basically kind of like the 80-20, like the top 5 browsers that most of America uses, and went through the same repro steps that my wife pointed out, and then also found that everything works fine when you just click login and go straight there, but really when you go through that state wizard, if you want to call it, everything blows up. The other frustrating thing about this bug is that cookie only gets set once, and that corruption was only there for a week. So if you had that cookie, if you had been on this site and went through that wizard more than a week ago, which includes all of the testing teams and the tech surge that had all been there, you would not fall into that bug. So the only reason why Kelly was able to reproduce it and Representative Langford is because that was the first time they were on that site, and when I ran it on a new machine, virtual machine, that was also a pristine instance, and so that was the first time. So all new people were there anyway. So horrible mess, right? So the thing was, after we found the steps to reproduce, I called Paul and said, I'm pulling the fire alarm. We have a reproducible issue. This confirms what Ryan was suspecting. And what it turns out is that, this bug was out there for 5 days, but enough people either had visited the site previously, and so they didn't have the corrupted cookie, they had the old cookie, or they clicked login and did like the shortcut that the testing team did. But for whatever reason, we finally had a reproducible thing to be fixed. Other thing that was kind of no pressure here, let's see if I have, what's my next slide here? Right. Finish the story. No pressure, but if that was Wednesday, the president was going to be giving a talk about the first time in a week or two about HealthCare.gov from the press room. And we also noticed every time that the president mentioned the word healthcare, there was a huge surge of traffic to the site. So now we know it's around 11 or 12 o'clock at night. We now have reproducible steps. This is the create account, but thing, he wasn't holding his iPad wrong. This was absolutely, this was confirmed a horrible, horrible thing. And then when we know the president's going to be talking in 12 hours, and every time he says the word HealthCare.gov, we're going to get a surge of traffic, and there's going to be a whole bunch of people hitting the create account button, and they're not going to get through. And he can't get up there and say, everything is great, we're fixing it, and all the reporters will be in the back of the room hitting their create account button. So we all dive in. Paul ends up coming up with a hot fix, and it really is, fixing the wrapping the code. Anyway, he fixed it. We got the fix into production around 3 or 4 a.m. I think at that point I had actually collapsed and gone to sleep. I think he went to sleep at like 7 o'clock at night or so, in the morning. And the president gave his talk, and the create account button was working, and we lived happily ever after, right? But the funny thing is that in that moment, Representative Langford, a Republican, was unfortunately actually providing really awesome, helpful oversight. He actually made the site better by pointing that out. I have not found him and asked to buy him a drink or anything, but someday I will walk up to him and say, hey, I don't know if you remember that moment, but anyway. So Mikey afterwards in our little kind of chat was like, achievement unlocked. Bug report via Congressional Oversight Committee. And this was, let's see, just some snapshots. This is a picture of Todd. That's Gabriel on the back. We're in DC, an undisclosed location, and we're watching the president give his remarks. That's basically a couple of hours after the create account fix has been deployed, and now we're standing there. Gabe is watching the metrics, the mix panel, the new relic, all the dashboards, because every time he says the word HealthCare.gov, those numbers spike. And Todd's just watching the president, I guess maybe to make sure he's not throwing him under the bus or something. Anyway, but no, it's all good. Also, one other thing about this kind of create account button and just like bringing up the website, this was the Times story that Steve Brill wrote a couple months later, and you can see Todd in there, Mikey's in there, and a whole bunch of awesome people. But this is actually from the first line. I hope I get proper fair use out of this quote. But this was like a comment from his chief of staff and talking about like what it's like to be with the president, like in the Oval Office. And the line is basically, the only way they can find out if anything is working is like by taking out our laptops and trying to go on the site, right? This is where we are. We have representatives hitting buttons on iPads and oversight committees, being really useful actually by doing that. And you have people in the Oval Office like just doing this stuff. And I was now, granted this quote is from months later, but this is kind of speaks to the ridiculousness of the situation. We had a kind of a joke on the project about flipping tables. You just find some stupid, ridiculous, horrible thing that should have never happened ever, and the only appropriate human reaction is to just want to flip a table and run out of the room in rage. And it's things like this that were happening every day, every day. It was a horrible, horrible mess. So what I realized though in that moment is that I finally figured out, I was happy to kind of help with that bug fix. I got some like points on the board. I finally felt like I was actually helping. But the thing was, as far as like getting plugged into one of the particular contractors, I was plugged into QSSI. They specifically wanted me to help with giving them a testing framework. Besides all the other things that I was helping with, that was one specific deliverable that I was on the hook for. They specifically gave me some things, I don't know how much detail I can go into, but some things connected to some stuff, and I helped with that. But I realized after the create account button, I had to press timeout, because that thing that they were asking me to do was really fancy and involved thousands of test cases and all kinds of crazy, 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 crazy stuff. And here we are, and we have this stupid create account button, and it's not working. And there, after we fixed it, we had to move on to the next crisis. But I was sitting there knowing that there was nothing, no process, no person there at console to make sure that the create account button didn't break the next day. And it totally could have happened because it was working a week ago and then it got broken and then we didn't notice for 5 days because of all the other horrible things that were going on. I mean, that's the other amazing thing is that no one noticed that that was broken because everything else was also, it was even more horrible. So I realized besides doing this testing framework, and we have all these awesome metrics with awesome graphs and all kinds of things, but we don't have a kind of, from a monitoring point of view, something that goes end to end through the app just like a person would, like a Selenium test, that would actually click on the stupid button, get farther than that, and hopefully create an account, apply for healthcare. And so I realized besides just creating this testing framework for the testing team, I'm going to kind of do this hybrid, I'm going to anoint myself in charge of this effort to whatever tests I write for that team, I will also be repurposing them as production monitoring. And basically, my mission to myself was, as long as I am alive and on this project, that button will stay working. I am the last line of defense for that stupid create account button. And so I had this idea. The other thing is, the button has changed my life. What you see here is actually broken out version of this. This is an animated GIF of that entire create account workflow. And so I have this idea, and actually years ago, if anyone remember me ranting about stuff, I've got lots of crazy ideas. One of them that I had was, instead of staring at terminal console output for boring, hey, the test's passed, or even like screenshots, I thought it'd be interesting to have movies, like screencasts or movies of the tests as your unit of discussion. Like if you wanted to convince someone something was broken, you would hand them a movie of this to kind of prove to them. And I kept on pitching this idea to development teams and QA teams. Developers would just want to look at the 80 asterisks on the unit test console, like 80 tests out of 80 worked, great, I'm good. Don't need to see anything. QA folks, they just need to see the screenshot of the last page. And I was really frustrated that no one cared about this movie idea. And then I realized, and this was now like 2007, 2006, I was ranting about this stuff. I realized I was completely pitching this the wrong audience, the wrong context. Where this is really useful is in this production monitoring kind of a context. And it's not necessarily for developers or QA. It's for like the president or the people in the monitoring offices where they're looking at all the graphs, but no one, well, the graphs can just say things are up. We have 50,000 people on the site or trying to be on the site. But still, you would have to flip open your laptop, darn it, and go to the green button and try to do it. So I figured if you had an entire dashboard, let's say like, a bunch of these, like for every permutation of all of your browsers, maybe on the x-axis, and then over y, you would have all your different workflows. You would be able to just step back and see a complete dashboard of this stuff. This has been something I've been ranting about for years. I hope someone would do it. It's probably a startup idea. Like, please, someone do it, because I want, in that moment, it would have been great if I could just go to this dashboard, find the create account process for the iPad, and go, oh yeah, there's the movie, and then send that off this way, and we would have, that would have saved a lot of time. But anyway, I still think it's a good idea. I also kind of wanted to add kind of some Hollywood aspects to it. So I added subtitles, and when I take the screenshots, I crop it properly so you don't see all the browser stuff. So I really have this idea of like, add some Hollywood flair to it. But this was actually really helpful. I would, after the whole create account thing, I would now be running this on my laptop pretty much for the end of the time, for the next month and a half that I was there, making sure the create account button worked. And I would be checking on this to make sure, to check on the results. Let's see, so, right, okay, so I've got three stories, right? The question of like getting plugged in. there's the button, which has changed the course of human events forever, right? And then there's the hug. This is at the end. They didn't, I wasn't able to take a picture of the moment, but at the end, this was in end of April. If open enrollment ended at the end of March, to not jinx it, they didn't want to do a mission accomplished, we fixed the thing. So they waited till after open enrollment to kind of sort of finally take stock and say, oh wow, okay, I think we're actually finally in the clear. And so there was a reception at the White House. He invited a few people. Some were like hospital administrators who were actually implementing the law. Also some random people like Bill Nye, the science guy. He was there, got a selfie with him, that was cool. Will Wheaton, he photobombed one of I should have put them in there. Anyway, so that was kind of crazy. But then also the tech team was there as well. And Kathleen Sebelius and a bunch of random people, all right? So we were there in the back. The president told us, or we were told, after he gives these remarks, I forget which wing, this is like the main part of the house, he wanted to meet the tech team specifically. Also, there's an interesting thing when this was going on. He talked about thanking the hospital administrators and blah blah blah, and then I think he even said like, oh, let's hear it for the tech team, and get some polite applause. And but then my wife got some good information that if you want to actually shake hands with the president and the first lady, the thing to do is not just mingle and eat all the cookies and the coffee, but to go straight to the podium and wait for the president to check, because he's going to do the rope line right after these remarks, and then head out. Anyway, so my wife was up there, and actually basically all the spouses of all the tech team, all the significant others, right, were all right there. And so when the president said, hey, let's hear for the tech team, my wife and Greg Gershwin's wife was right there, and they just started going, yeah, tech team, and so they were, crazy about it, right? And so what was awesome was, and I don't have video of this, sadly, but I swear it's true. After the audience was dying, the gentle applause were dying down, my wife and Penny, was her name, were still going crazy. So the president's like, wait a second, let's hear it again for the tech team, right? So again, so we were just sitting out there going like, that just happened, holy crap. But unfortunately, it was not on the public list of things. And here's the awkward thing about this is that, of course, my career has peaked. I will never do anything interesting again. My life is over now. And now I just get to write my memoirs or something, right? But so, where was I going with that? Anyway, anyway, this is a crazy moment. And what I was going to say is that there were a lot of people who helped with the project that couldn't make it that day because there were the vendors who, it's really no fault of their own, part of the problem, but the thing was these contracts were set up so they weren't allowed to be part of the solution, at least originally, because they were only told to do this, and this contractor was only told to do this. And so there was a certain level of inevitability of the horribleness of this thing is because everyone was doing their job appropriately, but no one was really in charge. And so there were lots and lots of people who helped, and not everyone could fit in the White House. And so it was a kind of a subtle thank you for people, but it felt really, really awkward to be there knowing how many people should have been there but couldn't. Anyway, so after he gave his remarks, Todd said, hey, he wanted to meet the tech team specifically. And at that point, actually, the tech team had grown quite a bit. There's a couple of people who were here in the audience who were there as well. There's another development team. Mikey's role, just running the war rooms and those daily stand-ups, that had grown to a bunch of people. He basically stole everybody who's a site reliability engineer at Google, and there was a whole bunch of people there. So the team was actually pretty big. We went downstairs to the room with Washington's portrait in it, and I felt like I had never been watched more in my life, walking down the stairs. Secret Service were like every 5 feet, and all I remember is basically telling myself, be cool. Not because I'm planning anything, because I didn't want to look like I was planning anything, or look like I was nervous about anything. So I just remember like, hey, what's up? But like, am I supposed to say something? I don't know. Anyway, so we go in the room. There's a couple of chairs lined up. Like, oh, okay, we're going to take a picture with the president, whatever. He comes in, gives a miniature version of the talk that he gave upstairs with more people, and then he says, hey, well, we take the picture. we clear the chairs, and he said like he wants to meet every one of us individually, like shake our hands and then whatever, right? So it was actually one other kind of side story to the side story. This was now May 1st or April 29th or something like that, and I had dropped everything, and I was on site all of November and December. I had actually missed Thanksgiving with my family. But I was home for Christmas, but then the day after Christmas flew back to DC. So I was gone for 2 whole months. And then I rolled off at the end of December. In February, I met up with Ryan Pachadsaram, who actually lives out here, but he splits his time between DC, and said, hey, are we ever gonna get to meet the president? Because like we did a bunch of stuff, and it'd be nice to get like a, attaboy or, I don't know, postcard or something. Like, does he know we exist? Like, anyway, I mean, he did, like, every day it was the president would talk with Todd would come and hang out with us, and so there was that connection. And the other interesting thing about the presidency, is that the president only ever deals with the most horrible thing on the planet at a given time. Because if it was, if someone else could deal with it at a lower level, they would have done it already. So basically anything at his desk, it got kicked the can all the way up. And really, for the whole month of November and October and November, the most horrible thing in the world was his own darn website, right? And the thing was, the narrative had switched from at the end of November and the beginning of December, and Ryan had, and the narrative had changed. All the media in the first week of December was like, it's now not mostly sucking to like, oh, hey, it's kind of getting better. I was able to like get there and register, and it's okay. So it wasn't perfect, but the narrative had changed. And Ryan had told me, like, this was in February, like, dude, if that hadn't changed, if it still sucked the first week of December, we would have met the president. And he would have not liked that meeting, because he would be looking us in the eye saying, what's going on? And then, of course, then telling us to fix it. So that didn't happen. So that's actually a good thing that we didn't meet him, right? So like, oh, okay. But still, it'd be like, oh, kind of nice at some point. I don't know, someday, whatever. Anyway, so but that moment happens at the end of April. So we're now in this room. He's now going through the rows, kind of handshaking. I'm like in the second row, so I have a couple of minutes or seconds to how I'm going to do this, right? So the guy next to me, I hope I'm going to embarrass him. Yeah. So his name's Robert Kennedy. He was. That's his name. He's one of helped on the site reliability engineer side of things, and but that's not his nickname, or sorry, that's not what he goes by. And so I was going to ask him, like, are you going to go by your nickname or your formal name? Like, it's interesting to see all these people. You don't get an opportunity to meet the president too often. And so some people were being very formal, very Law and Order, very kind of end of some Top Gun movie thing, whatever. Salute. I mean, they weren't saluting, but like people are very formal. And I was like, well, there are a million Jasons in the world. I don't want to play this too straight, whatever. So he said, like, no, this dude, we're in the White House, this is the president. It's your formal name. I'm like, oh, darn. So I knew what I was going to do. So he gets to me, and so I extend my hand, and I say, pleasure to meet you, sir. My name is Jason Huggins, but on the project, my nickname is Hugs. And so he shakes my hand, and in that moment, he freezes. And then I realize, oh, shit. I did something wrong. I'm going to get jumped by security. It's just this frozen moment. And again, like a lifetime in that second, right? So he's shaking my hand. I tell him my name is Hugs, or my nickname. And then he gets a big goofy smile on his face, and like, oh, well, then you get a hug. And so, so that like basically 15 formal, very formal handshakes, and then a hug. And I think I had broken the seal at that point, because I think I kind of caught at the corner of my eye a fist bump, but it went very badly at the after that. Anyway, so that was kind of crazy. I also have to clarify every time I give the story that he escalated. He hugged me. I did not ask for the hug. I went for the handshake, and he upgraded to the hug. So that would be weird, right? Anyway. So afterwards, we walk out, we go upstairs, I'm chatting with the other folks. Again, a whole bunch of people are like, you got a hug? What the hell? What'd you say? And like, I don't know, you hugged me, whatever. Todd was also, of course, this would have been useful information before, but he said like, oh yeah, he's totally a hugger, right? Like, oh, okay, good. Didn't know that. But one of the other guys who was there said like, oh, you know, the reason why he froze when you said your nickname was Hugs. I was like, why? Why is that? It's like, well, you're just happy. He's just happy that your nickname wasn't French Kiss. So it's like, that's it. So anyway, we'll never know. And ironically, I'm actually more of a fist bump kind of a guy, so I'm not really much of a hugger. So that was kind of funny. Anyway, so that's the hug. Right. Okay. So those are some of my untold stories that had yet to be told. Some serious stuff. Some of the things that came out after the aftermath is the playbook. There is now a new office that reports directly to the president. Well, maybe not direct. Well, kind of. It's technically kind of under the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. Mikey Dickerson is now the administrator of the U.S. Digital Services. He tried to go back to Google, but he realized Saving America is way more fun, so he left Google again and joined up as the head of US Digital Services. And one of the things that they rolled out about a year ago is this playbook. And I didn't realize, I kind of knew, I heard Todd talk about the digital service, which actually kind of is mirrored off of, ironically, the same disaster around a healthcare website deployment in the UK. They have a digital services equivalent in the UK now. Todd had been talking about this for a while. But specifically things, and their mission now is to prevent the next HealthCare.gov. And one thing that they can do specifically is kind of give some guidance. And along while they were working on this should get a round of applause right here. But finally, testing, automated testing, right? Woohoo! Ryan sent me an email saying, hey, just kind of, Ryan Patchetzer, I'm on the Tech Surge, helping Todd out. I didn't realize he was putting together the playbook, but he sent me an email and said, hey, you know, if you were going to ask some questions to people, what would you ask them if you want, like if you were going to go and talk to government agencies and say around testing and deployment, stuff like that. And oddly, like the first three are like from the email that I sent Ryan are there. So now so there is now a checklist. Automated testing now exists. This is a thing. This is a huge improvement in the way things work. You now, or at least it's not legislated. Like it's not like the rule of God or anything, but you now have to be asked. There is a checklist. Like these are a whole bunch of stuff. There's a whole bunch of other plays. There's 13 of them, or 13 I think. And these are just like general rules of thumb, good advice that have kind of been picked up from the private sector and kind of injected in. The useful thing about this playbook is you can get in a whole kind of detail about how government contracts get doled out. There's an RFP process, statement of work, a whole bunch of things. But the world is changing for the good because as a footnote to the new statement of work, for running the Department of Interior's, like if you want to reserve a campsite at Yosemite or something, that's another contract that gets written by somebody. As a footnote to that, this playbook is now appended to it. And so when you say you're going to go do something for the government, you have to answer and you have to kind of address all of these things that you want to, they want you to account for a bunch of stuff. And before all of this, it would usually say, hey, testing, like, do that, and write some test cases and give us your plan. And then they'll just say, oh, well, we'll have 50 manual testers and it's all good, right? And so like, okay, you get the contract and it's all awesome. Here's $50 million and it's all great, right? But now, now you have to actually answer the question like, hey, automated testing, what are you doing with that? So I am pretty happy that like there is now, automated testing is now in the conversation. But the other cool thing about this is that this is also up on GitHub, and this is one of the things that I want like everyone in the room to kind of like care about, is that if you think that was horrible that I got an email from a guy who worked for Todd in the White House, and I sent this, and boom, it's now that's there. People have to, this isn't law, but like here's a checklist. If you disagree with this or any of the things in the playbook, send a pull request, discuss it in the comments. Like, the government actually wants people to engage with this. And it's really important that the people in the room hear us now do it. Because it's not going to be helpful if a whole bunch of people within a 50-mile drive of the White House comment on this. We need the people who are in the trenches here in New York and Seattle and all the awesome places doing the awesome things, commenting on this and like, yeah, that's a legit thing. You should guys think about that. And it's really important because it becomes, my phrase, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of horribleness. If everyone just stays away, if the government puts out an RFP saying, hey, help us, and the government asks contractors to do stupid things, no one is standing up saying, that is stupid, you shouldn't do it. We can at least inject into this process. It's on GitHub. They met us halfway. And if you think specifically I was an idiot for suggesting some of these things, like start a discussion and send a pull request, and fight the power, change the system, whatever you want to call it. But get your 2 cents in as well. How are we doing on time, by the way? What time are we supposed to head out?
You can stay here as long as you want, Jason. I don't care.
Got it. So I'm thinking like whether I switch ahead here. A brief demo. One of the things, this is an open source project that I worked on in January, after I rolled off the project, and it was a whole kind of like, what the hell just happened? The one thing that I remembered was the New Relic, just putting my capitalist hat on, I go back to my job at Sauce Labs, CTO there, and now I've just, I go back to, hipster San Francisco startup-y stuff, and I just came back from the horribleness of DC, everything's horrible. Quick Test Pro, I wrote Java, it's horrible. And what do I do with, I've seen things I can't unsee. What do I do with this? And one of the things that I remember was, the one thing that New Relic didn't have, which ironically they now do, is a Selenium-based workflow production monitoring kind of a tool. It's something called New Relic has something called Synthetics. But that came out in like September of 2014. This was now January of 2014. And I had this idea like, wow, that's the one thing that they don't have. And all of the New Relic stuff, all the monitoring, it was amazing, it was awesome. And I thought it's also a good, don't know what the nerdy word is, like checksum against all of the graphs. If something falls off, that numbers are down, enrollments are down, you'd still want to confirm, like the president did, like Representative Langford did, open up your laptop and actually see the screenshots of all the stuff. And so I had this idea for the automated screencast thing, but also besides that, I also had this thing that I was told to do, where I was told to deliver a test suite to the manual testing team. And I knew that actually Selenium tests, automated tests, should be written by developers and really should just be jacked into the development team and screw the manual testers. But I realized actually being embedded with Mike next to those manual testers, they're not horrible people, they're doing a good job. And actually, it's really expensive and slow to bring on automated tests. When something is brand new, manual testers are there. And we really need to kind of bridge the divide. And so I had this idea that is something I think for them, for that team, I needed to give them where they could press a play button. And I think this is where I'm kind of coming at this, is like maybe kind of a new way to dust off the conversation about Selenium IDE in the community. I think recording is a dangerous thing, but I think it actually would be useful to deliver to teams who are really not technical a play button that they can at least play the tests and get something. I don't know if I have my internet connection here. I'll just show you kind of a brief demo, maybe. But this is a little thing that I put together, and it's called Workflower. It's kind of a pun because it goes through workflows, but the logo is a flower. And so you have these tests that are actually, they pull them up from the file system. They're written in Node, awesome JavaScript stuff, very simple. And I was hoping that the nerdy, awesome JavaScript node developers will be writing these tests, checking them into source control. But when I go to that manual testing team, besides all the other stuff that they're doing, they just open this app and click play. And they're now are synchronized between the development teams, and what they're doing is because you now have a tool that kind of like Selenium IDE can play, there has a play button and can do stuff. I mean, this is a stupid test. It just goes to Google, goes to Wikipedia. It's the proof of concept to just be able to bring things up. But I think there is some conversation to be had, a reinvention, if you will, of Selenium IDE, where the tests really are source control, but they are edited in an IDE, checked into GitHub, whatever. But I've seen them, I've met them, I know their names. There are people that can't write all of this code, and they should not have a record playback tool do it. But they need something with a play button that lets them go through. Because I really, Mike can talk to this as well, really empathize with them and to see that the pressure that they were under, the manual testing, or the testing team, especially in the context of November and December. And part of the thing that was brought in was in those war rooms when the tech team was saying like, okay, we have a fix, we have a bunch of fixes, let's push to production, the testing contractor would say, well, we need to test it. And we've got so much stuff, we have to do all the regression testing, we have to test the new fixes and all that stuff, and they had mostly manual testers there, not a lot of automation. And the process was basically like 3 days. And here's the interesting thing, like in end of October, the president, or actually Jeffrey Zients was the guy who kind of coordinated this. The way to get the press off the president's back for a month and a half was to say, okay, stop saying the site is horrible, we know that. So give us till December 1st. We'll fix everything by then. And so the administration got gifted a month and a half to actually fix things. But then the piper was going to pay the piper December 1st. But the thing was, if you look at anytime you do anything and now have to go through a 3-day testing cycle, you can imagine how much pressure those testers were under to get that to be faster. So one way to do it was inject some automation. But the other sad thing though is just like a lot of corners get cut, like that create account button. They just went and skipped the wizard just like everybody else did. And it was horrible. And so it'd be really nice to be able to, if we can't bridge the divide yet between all the developers with one contractor in some other city and the manual testers in one other town, if we can give them some kind of tool to click these things, that I wouldn't expect them to be programmers, but they can click this play button, and if things broke, they could share the screenshot, or like we can just post it. The other idea that I had around this, again, proof of concept, was when in the middle of all that horribleness, depending also on potentially a cloud service or something, it's hard to find out what you can trust, right? At that moment. And so it was really nice to actually have something really just on my laptop locally. And I was hoping that if I click play, I would have another button where I could just have it on repeat. So that, again, that create account loop that I had. Maybe if I go to dinner, I could just give this utility to somebody else and just say, hey, just hit the repeat button and just watch it if anything comes up. You can schedule it, put it on a Linux server in the cloud, set a cron job. You can do all the fancy stuff, but when you're trying to help somebody who doesn't have all these skills, it's really easy to say, install this application, open this file, click play, and then call me if anything horrible goes wrong. So there's this thing that's out there, and it would be a Selenium test, but this is kind of like a new way to look at it. And Workflower, it's up on GitHub. Things I wanted to end with, though, and I could give a whole 3 hours talk on just these things, but I'll try not to. Kind of a David Letterman style. The top 10 things that saved HealthCare.gov. Again, unfortunately, I'm going to have to fly through these. All of these actually deserve their own huge story. Anonymous Shopper 2.0. Gabriel Burtz did this, and one of the horrible things about HealthCare.gov was there wasn't really good data about what the healthcare plans cost unless you actually registered and did try to go through the system. And since no one could really get good data. But there was this notion of like, well, if you could pull some of the logic out of the app onto the learn side, people could shop for plans and find out what their subsidy was going to be without actually having to go into the application and do stuff. So this was all kind of like flat files and JavaScript, all kind of fancy stuff. And Gabriel kind of got that out there. And that was something he just kind of holed up into a room, did that, deployed it. That was a huge thing. The waiting room. This is another thing that would be embarrassing if Google or Yahoo or Hotmail or anybody did this, but this was something that absolutely was critical. Every day you had, the graphs would kind of go up. And for a long time, they would plateau. Basically, this is the number of people trying to get onto the site. At some point, it would just be flatline, and you wouldn't know how much more people would have wanted to be on the site, but couldn't. They're trying to add capacity, we're trying to fix bugs. But one of the ideas that they had was this waiting room. But again, it was kind of floating out there, a lot of people kind of working on it. Paul Smith, he just went and did it. And actually, I'll take indirect credit for this. I think I refused, at least for the first couple of weeks. I won't take credit for the waiting room, but I'll take credit for the fact that he wrote it in Go. The first couple of weeks I refused to write Java, and so I was really struggling and trying to rationalize writing all of the tests that I was going to be doing in Python. And so he was just doing Java, Java, Java. I refused. It's like, well, if Jason's going to be doing Python, screw it. I'm going to write some Go stuff. So he wrote this awesome Go-based waiting room, and what it did was if we had, they set this throttle that if more than 50,000 people were on the site, they would start all of the excess people coming to the site would be given a single page form that basically said, hey, sorry, we're at capacity, give us your email address, and we'll let you in when the capacity is down. And so what he does, he accumulated all these email addresses in a file, and then once the peak of traffic went down a little bit later in the evening, he would send out a one-time email, and then and that was it. It wasn't spammed, it was just that one time to get back. And that was able to keep the site from just completely falling over. And that was deployed basically the last week of November. That was one of the critical things that changed the narrative. Because what happens when, of course, 8 a.m. Monday morning, every reporter at CNN and Fox News is going on live, and let's go enroll for healthcare. And actually, some of the people were confused because a lot of those people got the waiting room page. Like, oh, it's still broken. Like, no, actually, there's other reports from people who were actually enrolling for healthcare, but it kept everything from completely crashing. And so that was an amazing thing, which again, embarrassing if you're an actual huge production, anyone else on the planet, but it was a stopgap measure that changed the narrative. That was kind of an awesome thing. And that was a lot of Paul. One thing that Ryan Pachadsaram really took on, and also Mina, and I'm gonna mess up her last name, I wanna say Singh, Mina Singh. She works at Optum. They had to wrangle in the reprioritization process, because you had CGI Federal, who was the developer. I could go into the whole thing of CGI versus QSSI, but you had the developer of the system, you had the testing team, and then you also had CMS, the customer, and they all had 3 different lists of what they thought was important to work on, and they were all critical 1 priority, blah, 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 and no one wanted to give an inch at all. But Ryan and Mita brought them to a room and basically would not let them leave until they consolidated these lists. And it had to happen like all the time. But again, that last 2-week period in November, getting to that December 1st kind of deadline, was a massive amount of work, a massive amount of stress, lots of speech and debate skills were needed to get people to agree on things. Ryan wrote lots of white papers on all kinds of stuff. So that was a huge thing. I'll try to go a little faster here. Performance metric goals. You'd be surprised that this was kind of like the first time they actually had like short, tangible, small goals. The site shouldn't take 8 seconds to load, because that's what it was when the tech surge team kind of showed up day 1. So the goal was like to get that down to like 1 second, right? Still horrible, but at least now we've got a goal to hit at. Error rates. The joke was in the beginning of October, they were at 9 5s in quality, right? And the goal was to get to at least 1 9. So the site was basically up 45, 55% of the time. I mean, that's just up or down. Not even like we're at capacity, where no, it's like flatlining, not even online half the time. And the goal was to kind of reduce that. Also, just the throughput. Actually, no, I get that wrong with the error rate, sorry. There's response time, uptime, there's the error rate of like when you get to the end and does it send you a 500 for some corrupted data or whatever, getting that down. And also throughput, like the number of people that they can have on the site. Obviously the first day, only 6 people could get through. By the end, there was like, I think maybe 50,000. I think maybe like the last time I remember looking at the dashboard, I think it was around 80,000 was the peak of traffic. I think that might have been like end of December, and during the final push into the deadline. Also, I can't talk enough about the war room. This was like for the first time, Mikey got everyone in the room, and this is actually something they brought in from Google, but it was amazing to see this, and this is where I jumped into my first day. I showed up and I was in the war room. And it was amazing to see Mikey work. He will say that, like, look, he did not write any lines of code. All he did was ask people to do their job. And what he did, though, it was amazing to watch him do his job, because you would have everyone who's in the room. None of the, well, Todd was allowed to be there, but otherwise, none of the politicians were allowed to be there. Only if you were able to help fix the system were you allowed to be in this room and talk. And what would happen is, Mikey would they would look at the prioritization dashboard of like the horrible thing, like, oh, the database needs to get upgraded, or we need new servers, or someone plug in the power, whatever, all kinds of crazy stuff. And then Mikey would point at the contractor from Red Hat or whatever and say, hey, how is it going with the database upgrade? And the guy would then be there, and for the first time ever, he couldn't just passive aggressively say, like, well, I sent off an email waiting for approval. That's what he said, like, hey, I'm waiting for approval. And then Mikey would say, like, who are you waiting for approval from? And he's like, and then this guy was now going to be baptized by Mikey's amazing discussion abilities. So Mikey would then say, well, who are you waiting for approval from? And he's like, so-and-so from so-and-so. Like, okay, what's their phone number? Let's call them now. Like, oh, okay, we're doing that, right? So we're calling so-and-so in the agency, whatever, like, hey, this is Mikey in the war room. I got so-and-so, put the thing in there. He's waiting for your approval on the purchase of the whatever. Does he have your approval? And the person on the phone's going, hi, yeah, like, great. Have a nice day, see you later. Okay, so-and-so, you got the approval. Are you good to go? And he's like, yes. It's like, okay, next on the list. And then so everyone in the room is like, do not call on me, do not call on me. They're on their phone getting all the pre-approvals. Like, I've got it. So this was just amazing to just have Mikey just look you in the eye and say, why are you blocked? Like, let's fix that now. They also had this thing of like, only focus on what's going to potentially kill us in the next 24 hours. Granted, this is not a great way to run a project normally, but the big thing about this time period of November and December was all about this firefighting. And actually, that was one of the kind of bittersweet things about being the testing guy in all of this. I can't remember if I said this earlier, but I felt like I was the smoke alarm installer in the middle of a firefight, of a burning building. And so I was happy to help, and I helped on a bunch of stuff. I at least helped with the create account button. But Gabriel and Brian and Greg and Mikey and everyone was just killing it every day, saving America, we would joke, every day. And so it was very enlightening. But yeah, this war room was amazing. Like, so Mikey, he's amazing. Anyway, that was an awesome thing. And it was sad, though, that it was the first time that they really kind of brought everyone together in one place to kind of work on it. Anyway, so that's like half of it, right? I should keep going faster. Analytics. One other reason, it's not so much that the TechSurge team was brilliant and amazing, it's that no one else really had insight into what the heck is going on. I think I had monitoring. Nope. Analytics and monitoring, right? So between the New Relic monitoring and the Google Analytics and Mixpanel, the team was able to really dive in and tease out what's working and what's not, and that was basically then became our actionable intelligence for what to work on the next day. And so it was kind of amazing, again, in these RFPs, they didn't specify, what are you gonna do for monitoring? What are you gonna do for analytics? Because like the mindset was, you're just gonna make something, deploy it to a couple hundred people in some government agency. You're not gonna have all of America trying to hit this thing all at once. And so everyone got blindsided by how you monitor stuff in production. And so, and it was a simple thing, just install some JavaScript, and Google Analytics, Mixpanel. But anyway, amazing things that helped save the day and made the team kind of better at their job. One thing that when I asked the other guys in the TechSurge team, like, hey, what's your top 10 list? Greg Gershman pointed this one out. Just getting to the development teams. The first day they met at the White House. They instantly went then with Todd and those guys, went to HHS. They finally, at the end of the day, maybe not even at the end of the day, it took them a while, actually were able to talk to developers. And here's the frustrating thing is you've got all of these officials and all of these managers and managers and managers and assistant deputy secretary to the blah, blah, blah. They all have opinions and you're all kind of funneled to talk to those people. And it took forever to get actually to people who write lines of code. It's amazing how just in the dungeon, the people who are actually writing all this code are and kind of considered kind of an afterthought. So, but the tech team brought in, they said like, no, I don't want to talk to any of these silly administrators or politicians. I want to talk to the person who actually can fix things, and that's the developers. And so it took a lot of pushing and prodding and jumping around a whole bunch of places to actually get to the developers. Eventually got the CGI Federal in Herndon, and that's where the war room was set up, and that's where they camped out. So that was a big issue. And Greg was pointing out, like, this took weeks to get that access to the development teams, and that kind of got forgotten. So I'm making it not forgotten. And then 2 on the list is Todd Park. In Todd we trust was our tagline. He was our go-between. And the delicate thing here is that you have a couple hundred years worth of regulations and rules and process and things you have to follow, but that failed in this situation. But you still have to follow the law. And so Todd was, he would joke, he'd always say like, well, this is just my 2 cents. Because there are laws in place that the president can't just go to anybody in the executive branch of the government and say, fix that button, or don't fix that button, or whatever. Like, you have to go through the chain of command. But we had a sense of urgency and whatever. So the delicate thing was, at these team dinners that we had with Todd, and like, the 5 or 6 of us, Mikey or Todd would sit back and say like, well, the president's worried about blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's the transfers to the Medicare system, those letters that are going to go out, whatever. But he would always just say like, you don't work for me, like Greg, Paul, you're contracted to CGI, Jason, Mikey, you're contracted to QSSI. You've got things working on, but like, it's just my 2 cents, but I think maybe you should look into that. And so Paul would make a joke about the ledger of 2 cents of how much Todd had accrued on the project, but it was very much, but he was our connection to the White House, to the president, and even publicly, even in the Times story, Jeffrey Zients gets a lot of public credit. You can probably look at it as like the AIR campaign, like talking to the media, like getting it out there, like December 1st, orchestrating like at a big communications level, the turnaround. But in the trenches, I don't know what the right appropriate military, Sherman or something. Anyway, the general of the army was Todd. Like, he made things happen, especially also when you're away from your family for 2 months, he was definitely like giving us moral support, but then also like tactical, like just my 2 cents, but maybe you should worry about this. Like, if there was a horrible thing, he made that horrible thing disappear. It was, he was amazing. So he was number 2 on my list, because also number 1 on my list is, again, Todd Park. Like, he is amazing. If you find him, he actually lives out here. He lives in Los Altos. His job, actually, he still works for the president. His job is to recruit, and so you should go talk to him, because he's awesome, and he wants you to help with the government. So that's top 10 things top 10 things that my opinion, saved the project. But here are the top 10 things that you can do to save America. Marianne sent you the link, I think, to the Congressional Oversight, the GAO, HealthCare.gov report. Everyone read it, right? Right. So I'm just debating whether I maybe should auction off my annotated guide. I have a couple of WTFs in here. I'm trying to think. Let's see. No, we can talk about it at the bar. But you should read that. But we'll get to that somewhere in the thing. Here are 10 things that you should do, and you really should do it. It's good that you came out tonight and heard me talk, but this is the beginning, not the end. One thing you can do is become a prime government contractor. Put the other guys out of business. Like, do it better. And the weird thing is this word prime. And you kind of heard me say earlier, like, subcontracting. So like, I subcontracted under QSSI, and the other guys subcontracted. It's all about contracting and subcontracting, and who's the prime and who's the whatever, subprime. It's ridiculous. And there's this weird thing where you couldn't just give the government contract to Google or Facebook or Pivotal or ThoughtWorks or whatever. You had to basically be pre-approved, pre-vetted for these contracts. And so there's a small list if everyone asking like, why did they give it to CGI Federal? Because they screwed up that other thing 3 years earlier. It's like, well, there's only like 5 companies you can choose from. So it's just kind of like a revolver, I guess, at that point. Like, which one do you choose? So get in the business and do it differently. If we are so smug in New York and San Francisco that we do it the right way, like prove it. Like actually get in there and do something about it. Don't let these horrible companies. I wonder if this isn't horrible. Don't let horrible things happen. I have to be careful, right? Anyway. So one other way, though, so the first one is actually really hard. Second one is a little bit easier. Work for a government contractor. Like, that's what I did. We subbed into one of these folks and then tried to kind of fix things from the inside. The delicate thing about this, though, is that to do this, you're going to have to sign an NDA. And they're kind of a non-compete, so I can't really go and work on something else after a year. And again, there's only like 5 companies working on this stuff. So at some point, if you've subcontracted with all of them, you have NDAs with all of them, you can't work with any of them or something, and you can never go and leave and start a prime contractor because you've signed things that keep you from doing that. So actually, if you're going to do number 10, don't do number 9. Come in completely from the outside, become a prime. But of course, how do you become a prime unless you kind of have built up your resume on doing projects for the government? So I actually don't know how to solve 10. But that's your problem. Or our problem, I don't know. But do that it's a whole big, horrible mess of contracting and subcontracting and prime and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, some other things that are not horrible. You can join 18F or you can join the USDS. I could give a whole other talk about this, and I'm totally out of time. 18F, though, is out of the GSA, Government Services Administration. They're actually working on targeted projects, and it's awesome. And the USDS is kind of a little bit more oversight, kind of cross-cutting against organizations. And both of these organizations are recruiting, and it's actually been in the news a lot. Like very senior people at Facebook are leaving and joining 18F. One of the people that I worked with at Google, he was head of the testing grouplet, which is like a testing club at Google, Mike Bland. All I did was introduce him to Todd, but but I did tell him like, hey, well, your country needs you. And because especially knowing that this government needs an injection of testing culture badly, and we had it at Google, and it was awesome. And so I figured, okay, let's get some of the more Google tester people into the process. So Mike Bland is there. He's at 18F. But there's a lot of people that are now not just quitting and joining and like joining Peace Corps or whatever. A lot of people are also just taking leave of absences from their job. That's what I did the first time. So you don't have to make this a forever thing. And actually, I think that would be better if you don't do it forever. Do it for 6 months. Do it for a year. I think actually if you go into USDS, it's only for 2 years. It's a quick rotation, so you won't get burnt out and demoralized. It's meant to be a quick thing. My goal is, I look at it, it's like if you're going to be a lawyer, I want this to be like this clerking for the Supreme Court. We need the best of the best plugged into these organizations and actually doing smart, intelligent things. And then go back to your awesome career and make the next Facebook, work at Facebook, whatever. But consider a small tour of duty with 18F or USDS, and then go back. And then that, besides actually fixing the system, the personified capital S, the system, we can have this dialogue. So when you come out of college or whatever, it's not just, is it New York or San Francisco? Like DC is on the map. And these are really smart organizations. A lot of smart people are there, and they're leaving their hot San Francisco jobs actually to go to 18F and USDS. Probably when I write up a blog post, I actually put out a tweet saying, hey, if you work at 18F or USDS, why do you like working there? I got a whole bunch of quotes. I didn't have time to put them in here. But there's some really smart, awesome people, and they love working there. And Mike Bland, even though he did some awesome stuff and was there forever at Google, he said, like, 18F, this is it's the best job I've ever had. And so that's kind of awesome. So go there. Some other things you should do. Start a think tank. Is there like what's the name of a think tank? I don't know. Whatever. Like, people who think about foreign policy and whatever. But is anyone thinking in a tank-like structure about how testing should be done, how software development should be done. Because right now we kind of sit back, drink our beers, and just complain about how horrible the government is, but we haven't kind of organized and really kind of put things out there. Because it kind of goes back to the homework assignment. The GAO, they're a bunch of congressional staffers, but they were correct to point out that software testing was one of the three things they focused on. Requirements were not good, system testing was inconsistent, project oversight was not effective. That was like, there's three things, and then they have a whole bunch of recommendations. But where do those recommendations come from? Like, well, what they did, because they're not software programmers, they went and looked up the IEEE standard for software testing. Right, it's a total joke, yes? I actually also looked that up, and it said, they even reference in here, 2008. I read the very first page of the IEEE testing standard, software testing standard, and it says these things should only be considered good for 5 years. So these are already expired. Like it says it right there. It's probably not the state of the art anymore to do these things, but yet it's quoted in there. And then this other sad thing at the end of this, it says CMS and HHS agreed with all the recommendations. So you have congressional staffers writing opinions based on IEEE standards that are expired, and you have another government organization who just agreed with them because they're like, okay, fine, I'll take it, sure, whatever. Got that off my back, right? There's no one standing at a podium, or there needs to be more people standing at a podium, thumping the podium, saying this is horrible. We need people flipping tables. We need people not just drinking a beer at the bar, but just like actually writing, like, but again, just not ranting, doing something about it, like talking to the GAO, talking to the IEEE, getting involved in the IEEE, which is my next one, actually. Change the IEEE best practices, because this is horrible, horrible, horrible. And I actually, on my last, on my going away party at the end of December, Todd was sitting next to me at dinner, and I finally had this epiphany that the only way to fix the system is not just getting in and writing a bunch of tests, even if it's fancy animated GIFs. The thing is that you have to move to DC. Well, maybe not have to, but some people have to. This is the way it works. The government wants a website. They put together something, but they don't know how it should be done. So they go and, well, one thing that's a safe bet is they go and hire contractors who are certified, IEEE certified, ISO standard, whatever, officially credentialed. The only way to change things is to change the credential itself. Not just change the contractors, not just change the government organizations, but change the official looking safe things. Because the GAO, when they wanted to look official and credible in their recommendations, they went with something that like, oh wow, it's got the word electronics in it. It must be good. Or electrical, whatever it is. Anyway, too many E's in there. But it's ridiculous. Their best practices are horrible and they're outdated and they know it. Someone should, I don't know who I should appoint, but someone needs to become a mole, get yourself into the IEEE process and get the word automation in there somewhere. Anyway, you should also start reading the RFPs. The 18F actually put a really cool website. It looks kind of googly even, just a simple search form, FB Open. I'll fly through the last three. Start a discussion group. Maybe it's not a think tank and you have to move to DC. Maybe just, maybe not so much a meetup, but like once a month, get a bunch of people and go download some horrible thing and mock it ceaselessly, but kind of, make it kind of an Oprah book club about it and, get going that way. Two other things, again, start writing. You can write a blog or you can kind of go old school and do a letter to the editor. The interesting thing about the blog, and that's why it's not just a random thing, is in the week or two after the HealthCare.gov launch, Paul Smith, the guy who brought me in, was not part of that tech search team, but he wrote a very articulate blog post saying, based on his experience running the Democratic National Committee website, here's some things that he can kind of tell based on the reports about what's going on with HealthCare.gov, and here's some things that he suggested. Todd Park, US CTO, saw that and picked up the phone and called him and said, hey, Paul, you read some good stuff. You want to help? So like that actually happens, and you should do it, and more people should do it. One other kind of rant on this is that everyone's kind of, who doesn't know Peter Thiel, sometimes people joke about like, sometimes the tech news websites is like, today and what Peter Thiel said. And one of the things he said was, one of his famous quotes was, we wanted flying cars, but we got 140 characters. That was his big rant about the ennui that we have in San Francisco, that we're not working on important things. And I kind of ranted about this on Twitter, ironically, last week, that it's like, my riff on that quote was like, well, we wanted veterans to not die waiting for their benefits, but instead we got rants about flying cars. And so there's a certain feeling of like, we can argue about there are too many photo sharing apps, because that's true, and there are too many photo sharing apps, but that's besides the point. Like, there are more important things to talk about. The government is completely screwing up a lot of stuff, and we should be talking about that, and forming intelligent opinions about how to fix that, instead of just ranting about photo sharing apps. The other kind of analogy, Todd, sorry, one other story. Todd would constantly talk about how the government, the way it procures software is like how it procures a battleship, because the government has hundreds of years of experience knowing how to have some company make a battleship for them. But we're really in the early innings on how to get companies to write software for the government. And if you believe the other famous quote, software is eating the world, this is not the last time the government's going to be making a website. Like, this is important. This isn't just something random that was humorous that happened 2 years ago. This is going to be happening all the time. And what I kind of extending this horrible metaphor about battleships, or that's not bad. It's not a bad metaphor, but maybe it's horrible how I extend it. I actually looked up the early history of the U.S. Navy, and it's the Navy's track record in the Revolutionary War. And it turns out that there was maybe like 50 or 60 ships, and most of them sunk by the end of the war. So we didn't have many ships left. And so I kind of liken this, if this is a very treacherous metaphor, we're kind of like America in the late 1700s. And we don't quite know how to make boats that float and not sink. And so I suspect and I expect 200 years from now, we are going to be freaking awesome. We're going to have the world's like aircraft carriers that are totally amazing, awesome. We totally do the Navy awesome now, but 200 years ago we did not. And so with software, like, this is now our moment. You are now the post-revolution people. We need to figure out how to make software that doesn't suck, make ships that float in the water for future generations, right? Anyway. And then the last one is, if you can't do all the other ones, the think tank one's kind of hard. Starting a prime contractor, that's really hard. But at least talk. Do not let this just kind of go away. So your friends, your family, your coworkers, like, spread the word. Like, maybe you won't join the 18F or USDS, but maybe you might convince somebody else that they should look into it, or someone who's graduating from college, maybe they should consider that for 6 months. Anything, but just actually just talk about it. So this isn't just a bunch of stories. And I think looking ahead, in the moment, in all that craziness in 2013, we were a little bit self-aware that this is a crazy story. A lot of these stories will get told. And we were kind of joked about, like, maybe there should be a book. I think I registered the domain techsurgemovie.com just in case. But we haven't done it yet. But the thing is, there's a certain level of, like, if all we do is share the awesome stories about getting a hug or fixing a button, that's great. There's a guy I used to work with, and his big thing was like, so what? So what? Great story, awesome, good on you, Jason, so what? And the so what is that this will happen again unless everyone in this room helps and cares. We cannot just let it become a self-fulfilling prophecy that, basically, if it will happen again, if everyone just stands back and does not care, it will happen again. And I don't want to let that happen again. Anyway, that's it. So this was the logo from the War Room. They put this together. 10/24/23 was the first day of the War Room's existence, and that's a honey badger. Have you ever seen the YouTube video, the honey badger? Honey badgers don't care. It's basically, I'm not sure if that's actually a metaphor for Mikey, but like, just do it, right? Don't care, just fix it. Anyway, that's my talk. Thank you.